In recent weeks of frontline footage, one image keeps returning with unsettling clarity. A Russian T-90M rolls forward under gray Ukrainian skies, and within seconds of a drone diving toward its turret, the vehicle erupts into a pillar of fire. The blast sends metal upward, hatches buckle, and crew members are seen fleeing moments before a chain of internal flashes turns the tank into a burning shell. These scenes have spread rapidly across the world, but the reasons behind them remain widely misunderstood. What viewers witness is not coincidence. It is the visible outcome of design choices rooted decades in the past, now colliding with the realities of modern drone warfare. This report begins by examining that pattern before moving deeper into its origins. And to understand why these tanks fail so violently, we must first look at the pattern repeating across battlefield after battlefield. The destruction of Russia's modern T-90M tanks in Ukraine often follows a chilling, repeatable sequence. First, a reconnaissance drone hovers above, quietly scanning the tank's movement and terrain. Then a small FPV first-person view attack drone swoops in and strikes the tank's tracks or rear deck, immobilizing the vehicle. Often, an anti-tank mine detonates beneath the hull at the same moment. With the tank trapped, follow-up strikes target the turret ring or the open hatch on top, and within seconds the tank bursts into flames. The flames creep inward until the ammunition begins to cook off, and finally the turret pops off in a violent explosion. One such example occurred in April 2024 when Ukrainian forces recorded a drone entering an open hatch of a T-90M, triggering an internal ammo explosion. In that attack, a Ukrainian FPV drone guided by real-time video footage penetrated the turret hatch of the T-90M and then ignited the tank's internal ammunition racks. In dozens of similar videos, the sequence is the same. A small fire at first, followed by internal pressure building, then a massive detonation that launches the turret and kills the vehicle. Analysts refer to this as the classic turret toss, or jack-in-the-box effect. Crucially, the fact that the crew share the same compartment as the ammo makes their survival almost impossible once the sequence begins. The chance of the crew escaping alive is extremely low. In many documented cases, the T-90M is left ablaze and abandoned by its crew, who flee on foot rather than attempt to recover the vehicle. For example, a December 2023 video showed a T-90M vehicle hit by a cheap Ukrainian UAV. Though the visible damage was minor, the crew abandoned the tank on the spot, apparently fearing the internal ammunition might explode. This fear is not irrational when the fire reaches the ammunition carousel located beneath the turret. Overpressure and heat typically trigger chain reaction explosions that obliterate the tank within seconds. Recent battlefield footage from the eastern Ukraine front underscores how often this happens. A March 2025 report detailed a Ukrainian drone strike that destroyed a T-90M, valued at about $4.5 million. That single strike aligns with the broader pattern: a multi-stage attack using cheap unmanned systems to exploit a structural vulnerability. What is striking is the frequency with which immobilization happens first. That is, the tank's tracks or engine are hit, the vehicle is trapped, and only then does the fatal shot or grenade find its way into the turret or roof hatch. The psychological effect on Russian tank crews is severe. Soldiers have explicitly expressed reluctance to board the tanks, even when the vehicle remains seemingly intact. Some units are reported to have left functional T-90Ms behind simply because the crew believed they would be burned alive inside. The result is not only the destruction of a vehicle, but the erosion of morale in Russia's armored units. In sum, the destruction cycle unfolds like this: reconnaissance drone, immobilization, mine or track hit, FPV strike on vulnerable point, internal fire, ammunition cook-off, turret ejection, and vehicle loss. Each phase compounds the next and leaves almost no margin for crew survival when the ammunition sits adjacent to them. The fact that this pattern repeats so predictably across the battlefield reveals not luck but a design flaw, one that modern drone tactics exploit with grim precision. But to understand why this sequence repeats so consistently, we have to trace it back to a design decision made long before the first drone ever appeared over Ukraine. The main reason Russian tanks explode so easily is the ammunition system sitting inside them, and this design choice goes back to the Soviet era. During the 1960s and 1970s, Soviet engineers wanted tanks that were fast to build and simple to operate. So they removed the human loader and replaced him with an automatic carousel placed directly under the turret. This decision reduced the crew from 4 men to 3 and allowed the tank to stay smaller and lighter than many Western designs. According to defense analysis from Janes and RUSI, Soviet planners believed a lower profile made the tank harder to hit and easier to hide behind terrain features, especially in large armored attacks. The carousel sits in the same space as the crew because that position saves weight and shortens the internal layout. And this was important to Soviet leaders who wanted thousands of tanks ready for a possible conflict with NATO. Inside this circular rack lie both the explosive charges and the shells, stacked around the crew's legs like a spinning ring of ammunition. The engineers accepted this risk because the doctrine of the time expected the tanks to move in large numbers, overwhelm defenses, and win through speed, not protection. Reports from the drive explain that the Soviet Union valued mass production more than heavy armor, especially for the T-72 line, which later became the base for the T-80 and T-90 families. The location of the ammunition creates a serious danger the moment the armor is pierced. Once a projectile enters the interior, even a small piece of superheated metal can touch the propellant charges, and that is enough to start a chain of fire. This internal space is very tight, and the blast has nowhere to go except back into the crew area. RUSI notes that a single penetration can trigger a jack-in-the-box effect, where stacked charges ignite one after another until the turret is blown off completely. Because everything is so close together, the explosion spreads in seconds, and the crew has almost no time to escape. The T-90M, which Russia calls its most advanced tank, still carries this same dangerous layout because the platform comes from the original T-72 design. Even though the T-90M includes new armor, thermal sights, and upgraded electronics, the carousel remains in its old location beneath the turret. Business Insider reported in multiple cases that Ukrainian drones or anti-tank missiles penetrated the turret roof or the side and ignited the ammunition, destroying the tank almost instantly. The upgrades protect against some threats, but they cannot change the fact that the ammunition sits directly beside the crew. This flaw appears again in the T-80, which uses a slightly different engine but the same carousel system. The T-80 gains speed and mobility by using a gas turbine engine, yet it still stores most of its charges under the turret, and this has led to several dramatic explosions when the vehicle came under attack. Oryx, a group that tracks visual losses, has recorded hundreds of Russian tanks destroyed in ways that match this pattern, showing that the issue is structural rather than accidental. Russia never redesigned these tanks from the ground up, because doing so would require a new factory line and a much larger budget. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, Russia lost much of its industrial capacity and could not afford to replace millions of stored shells and hundreds of existing hulls. Instead, engineers kept modifying the old base models with new armor panels, reactive bricks, and electronic systems, while leaving the ammunition carousel untouched. This approach saved money and time, but it kept the central weakness in place. Reuters has reported that modern T-90Ms are often rebuilt from older T-72 hulls, which makes deep structural changes nearly impossible. Because of this, the core doctrine remained the same. Build lighter tanks, move fast, and accept the risk to the crew. The design works only if the enemy cannot strike from above or cannot land precision hits on weak spots. In Ukraine, however, Drones, guided missiles, and top attack weapons have made this design philosophy dangerous, since every strike now tests the carousel directly. Once the propellant charges burn, the tank's chances of survival drop to nearly zero, and dozens of recent battlefield recordings confirm this outcome. This contrast becomes even clearer when we compare it with how Western tanks are engineered for survivability rather than speed. Western tanks survive battlefield hits far more often than Russian models because their ammunition is stored in a separate armored compartment. This design protects the crew even when the vehicle takes a direct strike, and it reflects a completely different philosophy that Western armies have followed for decades. According to Jane's Defense and RUSI, NATO engineers always placed crew protection above speed or production volume, so they built thicker armor walls around ammunition and added blast-proof barriers between each section of the tank. Inside an Abrams or a Leopard 2, the ammunition compartment sits behind a sealed armored door, and this door stays closed whenever the crew is not loading around. If a missile or drone manages to reach that compartment, the blast is pushed upward through special panels called blow-off panels. The drive explains that these panels open like safety valves and allow pressure to escape through the top of the tank, preventing the explosion from entering the crew space. Because of this system, the fire moves away from the soldiers, and the fighting compartment stays intact long enough for the crew to escape. One strong example came from Ukraine in late 2023, when a Leopard 2 survived multiple hits from Russian anti-tank weapons. Business Insider reported that in that incident, the vehicle remained damaged but intact, and every crew member managed to climb out safely. Another case involved an American-made M1, Abrams operating with Ukrainian forces in early 2024, which was struck by a drone on its engine deck. The fire stayed outside the crew area, and the soldiers evacuated without injuries. Reuters noted that even though the tank later burned out, the system designed to protect the crew worked as intended. These events show how Western design choices shape battlefield outcomes. Abrams and Leopard, two tanks weigh around 60 to 65 tons, and much of that weight comes from armor layers on the sides, roof, and rear. Engineers made the tanks heavier because they wanted to control the direction of a possible internal blast and shield the soldiers inside. The extra mass also creates space for armored bulkheads, hydraulic doors, and fire suppression systems. In contrast, Russian tanks usually weigh between 40 and 48 tons, and that lower weight forces compromises in armor thickness, especially on the top and rear plates. This difference reflects two very different doctrines. The United States, Germany, and other NATO countries train crews for many years, and each crew represents a large investment. Because of this, Western militaries treat crew survival as a priority, and they design their vehicles to bring soldiers home even if the tank is lost. Soviet Doctrine, however, expected large numbers of tanks to push through enemy lines in high-intensity battles, so the designers focused on speed, low cost, and easier production. The carousel autoloader made that possible, yet it placed the crew beside the ammunition and removed the safety that Western tanks depend on. In Ukraine, the effect of this difference is very clear. Crews operating Western tanks often trust their vehicles more because they know there is a physical wall between them and the ammunition. Reports from United 24 and Business Insider show that many Ukrainian soldiers prefer using Western armor because they believe the extra protection gives them a genuine chance to survive a direct hit. This trust matters, especially in a war where drones and missiles strike from unexpected angles and leave almost no time to react. As the conflict continues, more Western tanks are appearing on the front line, and their design helps them endure repeated attacks that would destroy lighter vehicles. While they are not invincible, their structure gives crews a crucial window to escape, making a single strike far less deadly. Each example from the battlefield reinforces the idea that survival is the core of Western armored engineering. Yet, survivability is only part of the story. The real shift in this war comes from above. where drones now control the pace and direction of every armored engagement. Modern drone warfare has turned the roof and rear of Russian tanks into their most dangerous blind spots, and this change in the battlefield has happened faster than their armor can keep up. The T-72, T-80, and T-90 families were built for ground threats, not aerial attacks, and their upper plates are thin enough for small explosive charges to break through. Jane's Defense notes that these roof sections were never meant to stop top attack weapons, and the rise of FPV drones has turned this weakness into a deadly problem. UAV reconnaissance teams play a crucial role because they watch tank movements from above, and they do this long before the first strike arrives. These small drones mark the vehicle's location, and they send the coordinates to FPV operators or anti-tank teams waiting nearby. Reuters has reported that Ukrainian forces often keep several drones in the air at once, which allows them to track Russian armor for minutes without being detected. Once a target is found, the drone shadows the tank until the moment is right for a coordinated attack. The most common method uses 2 or even 3 strikes in a carefully timed sequence, and this tactic leaves the tank almost powerless. The first drone hits the tracks to immobilize the vehicle, and the next one aims for the turret ring or engine deck where the armor is weaker. The drive explains that FPV drones can steer mid-flight and adjust their angle to hit these points, which makes them more accurate than some older anti-tank rockets. Because the crew cannot move once the tracks are destroyed, each follow-up strike becomes easier, and the final hit often ignites the ammunition stored below the turret. The roof armor on Russian tanks offers almost no protection when an FPV drone dives from above, and this is the main reason so many turret hits lead to catastrophic explosions. According to RUSI, Soviet engineers designed these vehicles for direct firefights on flat ground, expecting shells to hit from the front. FPV drones reverse that logic because they approach from the sky, and even a small warhead can create an internal fire. Once that fire reaches the carousel ammunition, the vehicle enters a cook-off cycle that ends in total destruction. Some of the most striking battlefield clips show Ukrainian drones dropping grenades directly through open hatches, and these moments reveal how exposed Russian tanks have become. In several cases recorded throughout 2024 and early 2025, crews left their hatches open for ventilation, and Ukrainian UAVs released grenades straight into the turret area. Business Insider covered one such attack where a drone slipped a grenade through a T-90M's hatch and caused a rapid internal blast. This type of strike bypasses armor completely because it enters the vehicle before any defense can react. Drone warfare has grown even more effective because the tools are now cheap and easy to deploy, and this has changed the cost balance of tank battles. A T-90M can cost more than $4 million, while an FPV drone may cost only a few $100s. The Ukrainian government's United 24 media platform reported in March 2024 that several T-90Ms were destroyed by low-cost FPVs in a single week, showing how quickly these weapons can create losses. This price gap matters because Russia cannot replace modern tanks at the same speed Ukraine is deploying new drones. Another reason these losses have multiplied is that drones attack from directions that the older tank designs cannot defend, and these angles expose the thinnest armor plates. The rear engine deck, for instance, has light shielding meant only to stop fragments, so FPV drones with shaped charges can pierce it easily. Once the drone reaches that spot, it pushes fire into the engine compartment, forcing the crew to abandon the tank, and the next strike usually finishes the job. The combination of aerial surveillance, cheap precision weapons, and multi-stage attacks has rewritten how armored warfare works, and Russian tanks have struggled to survive in this new environment. Each hit shows the limits of designs created long before small, fast drones existed, and these vehicles have become symbols of a doctrine that can no longer match the tools used on today's battlefield. Russia has tried to adapt, but the solutions deployed on the battlefield reveal more desperation than capability. Russia has tried several improvised methods to protect its tanks, Yet these attempts have shown more panic than progress. Crews have welded metal cages over the turrets, stacked wooden logs on the hull, and even attached pieces of construction fencing to block drones. Reuters reported that many Russian T-72 and T-80 tanks appeared in 2024 with large cope cages covering the entire roof, and some units in the southern front even wrapped their vehicles in steel plates taken from old buildings. These ideas came from a real fear of FPV drones, yet they rarely change the outcome during actual combat. The reason these cages fail is simple. FPV drones can strike from several angles at once, and they are guided by operators who watch every movement from above. The Drive explained that Ukrainian FPV teams often circle a tank before choosing the weakest entry point, and the drone can slip through any small gap in the cage. Because the cages are not tested to military standards, the metal bends easily, and the drone's shaped charge still penetrates the armor beneath it. Even heavier steel layers cannot stop a modern warhead, and the extra weight only slows the tank, making it an easier target for follow-up strikes. Several battlefield clips show that reinforced tanks still explode when hit in the right place, and these examples prove that the upgrades are not solving the core problem. In early 2025, Business Insider published footage of a T-90M protected with additional metal plates. Yet a Ukrainian FPV drone still ignited the ammunition inside, and the turret was blown upward in a massive fireball. Other examples gathered by Oryx show similar losses across multiple regions, with dozens of tanks destroyed despite visible attempts to reinforce their turrets or engine decks. Because the ammo sits beneath the crew, any penetration into the turret area remains deadly, no matter what the crews bolt onto the outside. These repeated failures have had a serious psychological impact on Russian soldiers, and many crews now hesitate to enter their tanks, even when they appear functional. In several reports from late 2023 and early 2024, United 24 described crews abandoning modern T-90M tanks after minor drone hits, apparently fearing that the ammunition might ignite without warning. Some soldiers even prefer to move on foot despite the danger, because they believe the vehicle offers no real protection. This fear spreads quickly through armored units, especially when they witness turrets being launched into the air only a few hundred meters away. As this fear grows, Russia's armored brigades are losing both vehicles and trained crews, and this slow erosion weakens them week after week. Mines placed along supply routes cut off mobility, ATGM teams destroy tanks from long range, and FPV drones finish off any vehicles left isolated. Reuters stated that certain brigades near Avdiivka and Kupiansk lost up to half their armored strength in a matter of weeks, leaving them unable to hold territory or support infantry. Each tank lost also represents a crew that must be replaced, and Russia struggles to train new teams fast enough to match these losses. The overall result is a steady decline in combat power across several fronts, and the improvised cages do little more than highlight the growing desperation within Russia's armored forces. Each destroyed tank adds to this pressure and forces commanders to reconsider how they deploy their vehicles, as the old Soviet-style approach no longer fits the reality of modern drone warfare. All of this leads to a deeper question. What does this mean for Russia's broader strategy and for the future of armored warfare itself? The repeated explosions of Russian T-90M tanks show how a Soviet idea built for speed and low cost has reached its breaking point in Ukraine. Footage from early 2024 to early 2025, documented by Business Insider and Reuters, reveals tank after tank destroyed the same way, proving that this design can no longer survive the age of cheap drones. Western vehicles like the Abrams and Leopard 2, confirmed in reports from Janes and The Drive, survive because they protect their crews first, and this difference has become clear on every front line. As Ukraine keeps using precision drones and top attack weapons, Russia's older Doctrine grows weaker each month, and every destroyed T-90M marks the end of a system that lasted nearly 50 years. This shift forces militaries worldwide to rethink how tanks should be built in the future. This is where the next phase of armored warfare begins, shaped not by steel alone, but by the technologies now circling above it. If you want deeper analysis of modern warfare, make sure to subscribe to Military Force so you never miss our next report.